Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasoda Nandana Bhajana Randana Yasoda Nandana Bhajana Randana Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Parivrajakacharya Astotra Satashi Shrimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nityananda Krishna Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Astotra Satashi Shrimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Nama Acharya Shri Thakur Ki Brahmsika Hol Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gaur Gopanath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Braj Bhumi Shivan Dama Dama Ki Navadip Mayapur Dama Ki Pushtam Chitra Jagadapuri Dama Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Maharani Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Go Premanandi. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thank you. Maitreya Swa Sambhavam Nishamyaivam Swasambhavam Nishamyaivam Swasambhavam Vishamvayaivam Tapo Vidya Samadhibi Tapo Vidya Samadhibi Tapo Vidya Samadhibi Swasambhavam Nishamyaivam Tapo Vidya Samadhibi Yavan Mano Vacha Stutva Yavan Mano Vacha Stutva Yavan Mano Vacha Stutva Virarama Sa Kinavat Virarama Nakinnavat, Virarama Nakinnavat, Yavan Manovachastutva, Virarama Sakinavat, Maitreruvacha, Swasambhavan Nishamyaivam, Tapo Vidya Samadhibi, Yavan Manovachastutva, Virarama Sakinavat, Maitreruvacha, Swasambhavan Nishamyaivam, Tapo Vidya Samadhibi, Yavan Manovachastutva, Virarama Sakinavat, Maitreruvacha. The great sage Maitreya said, so Sambhavan, the source of his appearance, Nishamya, by seeing, Evam, thus, Tapa, penance, Vidya, knowledge, Samadhi, as also by concentration of the mind, Yavat, as far as possible, Mana, mind, Vacha, words, Stutva, having prayed, Virarama, became silent, Sa, he, Brahma, Kinavat, as if tired. Translation. The sage Maitreya said, O Vidura, after observing the source of his appearance, namely the personality of Godhead, Brahma prayed for his mercy as far as his mind and words would permit him. Thus, having prayed, he became silent, as if tired from his activities of penance, knowledge, and mental concentration. Responsively. The sage Maitreya said, O Vidura, after observing the source of his appearance, namely the personality of Godhead, Brahma prayed for his mercy as far as his mind and words would permit him. Thus, having prayed, he became silent, as if tired from his activities of penance, knowledge, and mental concentration. It's a really interesting section, this, of the Bhagavatam, and it talks in this verse about how Brahma is his swasambhavam, so he saw the Lord directly before him. And I was reflecting on this yesterday. I don't know if anyone was looking at the clouds yesterday evening, and the sun was catching on the clouds, and there was like golden edge around the clouds. It was really stunningly beautiful. And I was thinking, if it looks so nice here in this material world, what's it like in the spiritual world? Do you see these things in the spiritual world and just get stunned in ecstasy? And I'm wondering, is this what's happening to Brahma? Is he becoming so stunned that he can no longer speak because the Lord is standing directly before him? It's just like, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of something like, when you go into a radio transmitter room, especially with FM radio, because it's really high power, you can actually feel the electricity in the room. It's very powerful. And this is just something material, if you're in the sort of proximity of something very, very powerful, you can actually feel the power. But Krishna is so powerful, you cannot estimate how powerful he is. You cannot measure how powerful he is. He is unlimitedly powerful. And so to be in his presence would be quite extraordinary. I think it's something we couldn't actually conceive with our mundane mind. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Brahma's enlightenment in knowledge was due to the Lord sitting within his heart. If you remember the very first verse of the Bhagavatam, that's saying how Hriday means from the heart. So the Lord enlightened Brahma from within the heart. This is the very first verse in the Bhagavatam. After being created, Brahma could not ascertain the source of his appearance. But after penance and mental concentration, he could see the source of his birth, and thus he became enlightened through his heart. So we go back a few, I think it's actually a picture, not this one, the picture on the cover of one of the third canto. It shows Brahma sitting on the lotus, and then you see the Lord below him on the Ananta Shesh, the Sheshashayi, the serpent couch. And when he first appeared on the lotus in the first kalpa, which is called the Brahma kalpa or the Padma kalpa, it was all dark, and he was just there, and he didn't know who he was, he didn't know the source of his creation, he had no idea what was going on. But then he heard these two words, tapa, or these two syllables, tapa, and he started to meditate. He understood that he should perform penance and meditate. And he started to meditate upon the Lord, and then from within the heart, the Lord revealed to him his source of creation, his identity, and his duty. The spiritual master outside and the spiritual master within are both representations of the Lord. Unless one has contact with such bona fide representations, one cannot claim to be a spiritual master. Lord Brahma had no opportunity to take the help of a spiritual master from outside, because at that time, Brahma himself was the only creature in the universe. So where's he going to get direction from? There's no one else, it's just him. Therefore, on becoming satisfied by the prayers of Brahma, the Lord enlightened him about everything from within. And this is actually referencing a really interesting verse. I'll just dig up this verse for you, because I don't know this verse, but it's referencing it. So let me see if I can find it quickly. 11:29:6. From the 11th canto. So this is the Lord speaking to Uddhava. It's part of the Uddhava Gita. I won't read the verse, but I'll read the translation. So this is Uddhava. O my Lord, transcendental poets and experts in spiritual science could not fully express their indebtedness to you, even if they were endowed with the prolonged life of Brahma. For you appear in two features, externally as the Acharya and internally as the Supersoul, to deliver the embodied living being by directing him how to come to you. So this is the prime duty of life. This prema pamato mahan, as is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is to develop this love of Krishna. This is our prime necessity. But as is explained in the scriptures, is without the direction of the guru, without the direction of a spiritual guide, we cannot understand that, nor can we actually follow the path, because we don't know what the path is. So therefore, a guide is necessary. And as this verse from the 11th canto is pointing out, is Krishna manifests himself in two ways. He manifests as the Acharya, externally, or as a super soul within the heart to guide us. So this is a very, very important understanding. And we see here that Lord Brahma, because he's the only creator, he's the only living entity that's created at that point, therefore the Lord guided him from within. And we can also receive that guidance within, and if we're actually attuned to it, if we're aware enough, we can actually realize this guidance of the super soul. But because of the influence of the conditioned nature, we have to be a little bit cautious, not just to think that whatever I'm hearing from within is the guidance of the super soul, but we need to get that externally confirmed. And so we see in the scriptures it also describes how it is guided from the super soul within. We are guided from the super soul within, but it is confirmed by the spiritual master from without. So we need to have some confirmation of these instructions. Not that we think, oh yeah, Krishna's telling me to, Krishna's telling me to go and rob a bank, or Krishna's telling me to go and do something silly. And sometimes devotees do have these types of, wouldn't really want to call them realizations, but they do have these types of perceptions where they think that Krishna is telling them to do things which are not necessarily in the line of bhakti. So it's quite interesting how Lord Brahma has received that. And then Prabhupada's quote, is paraphrasing this verse. So this part of this chapter, there's up to, actually this verse here is the last verse in this section. And what we see here is that this is entitled Brahma's Prayers for Creative Energy. So up until this verse, or actually verse 25, Brahma is praying to the Lord for the prayers. For this guidance for creative energy. So he starts off with there's 5 divisions of prayers here. And you'll see it's quite common at the beginning of any scripture, like the Chaitanya Charitamrita, for instance. There's the Mangalacharan, where Krishna's Kaviraj, he's glorifying the personality of Godhead, and then he's seeking benedictions. So it's divided into, I think there's 3 distinctive sections there. And we see it quite often when a great personality is offering prayers, there's different divisions or different sort of ways they pray. And so the same thing is happening here. In the beginning, Brahma, he's glorifying Krishna. He's saying that actually the only good fortune for a person is when they take shelter of your lotus feet. So that's the first 4 or 5 verses. And then he goes on to describe the situation of those who are unable to take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, and describes this as being a very, very a vulnerable situation, and how the living entity who can't take shelter of Krishna is in a very, very difficult situation in this material world. This is also quite interesting, the prayers there. Then he prays to the Lord for reciprocation. I perform this tapasya, but by your mercy I perform this tapasya, and I've achieved enlightenment here. Now please reciprocate with me, because the purpose of him praying is to get guidance to create the universe, because this is the beginning of his day, and he has to create the whole universe, and it's quite a task that he has to do when you think it. He has nothing. It's just him sitting on top of the lotus. He doesn't have any bricks, mortar, or anything like that. He's just sitting on top of the lotus, and he doesn't even know how to go about it. I think this section here is describing the Padma Kalpa, which is when the lotus appears and Brahma appears on top of the lotus, because there in one day of Brahma. In 1 month of Brahma, there's 30 different kalpas, because each night he goes to sleep and he wakes up in the morning, he creates again. At least the bottom half of the universe, because up to the point of Tapaloka, Janaloka, Mahaloka, which are the planets up above us, these are inundated when the waters of devastation rise up. But Brahmaloka and the Saptarishi planets and other planets like that, they remain. But all the planets below that are inundated, destroyed. So every day he wakes up and he recreates these things. But at the beginning of his life, he starts with nothing. There's nothing to create with. And he doesn't know how to do it. But through his performance of tapasya, then, as it says in the beginning of the 10th day, Brahma Adhikavaye, within the heart, Krishna reveals to him how to do this, how to create the universe. So it seems from these prayers here that this is, and actually it mentions later on, I think in the 12th chapter, that this is the Padma Kalpa. And so, he's praying for this reciprocation of the Lord. I perform tapasya, please, be kind upon me and reciprocate with me. Help me to know how to do this task. And then he offers obeisance to the Lord, and through various prayers, which are really sweet prayers. And then finally, he requests empowerment to create. He wants to, please empower me that I can do this service for you. And then he also prays the Lord, please protect me. And this is really interesting. And this, I feel that these 4 verses, 22, 3, 4, 5, these are really important for devotees to understand, not necessarily to know the prayers or whatever like that, but to understand the mood of what's going on in these prayers. Because if we look back at verse 22, He says, let the Supreme Lord be merciful towards me. He is the one friend and the soul of all living entities in the world, and he maintains all for their ultimate happiness. By his 6 transcendental opulences, may he be merciful towards me, so that I, as before, may be empowered with the introspection to create. So he's asking for empowerment. Please empower me to create. Now, one of the problems that happens is when we do something great or wonderful, what happens? We create a house or we create a skyscraper building or something amazing. What tends to happen? Huh? We get praised. And what happens when we get praised? You get a bit puffed up. Yeah, you get a bit proud. Look at what I've done. But this is so detrimental to the process of bhakti. There's a really nice verse in the, I think it's in the 3rd chapter of the Gita, which is Kamani Evidigaraste Ma Padesha Kadashana Ma Karma Padhetavu Ma Testam Gustu Karmani. You have the right to perform your prescribed activities, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your activities. Never think yourself the doer of things, neither that or give up your duty. So Krishna's explained to Arjuna, okay, do your activity, but don't think you're the doer. Just understand you're being enabled to do this. You're being allowed to do this. So this is Brahma's next prayer, where he actually prays in the next verse. He's saying the Supreme Lord, the personality of God, is always the benefactor of the surrendered soul. So he's a surrendered soul. Lord Brahma is completely surrendered to Krishna here. His activities are always enacted through his internal potency, Rama, or the goddess of fortune. I pray only to engage in his service in the creation of the material world, and I pray that I may not be materially affected by my works, for thus I may be able to give up the false prestige of being the creator. So even he's doing this fantastic work of creating the universe. As I was mentioning before, this universe is quite extraordinary. All you have to do is just look around you and see what's going on in this universe, and it's amazing. You look at how some of these, living entities, how they function, how they do things, even, just the beauty of like, I saw a short video on Twitter yesterday, and it's showing a cuttlefish. You see sometimes the cuttlefish, those hard sort of things we used to put in the budgerikar cage, and the budgerikars would grind their beak on it. So like the cuttlefish, when it's being threatened or attacked by another living entity, it changes because it's got like it's got a mouth, and it's got all these 4 or 5, maybe 5 or 6 tentacles around its mouth, and so that's how it gathers food and eats food. But what it does sometimes is when there's a predator coming, it sort of puts its tentacles out like that, and somehow they transform. It looks like coral. And I thought, my God, Krishna's incredible the way he's done these things. He's given this living entity a natural protective sort of ability where it can just sort of show itself in a way that the living entity will think, oh, this is coral, I'm not going to eat that because it's going to be crunchy and stuff. I don't like that. So we can see this in so many aspects of the creation. Even there's a butterfly, they call it a glass-winged butterfly. And so when it lands on its wings are clear. And when it lands on a flower or something like that, it just sort of puts its wings flat and the predator can't see it. And Krishna's creation is so extraordinary how he's created all these different things in order so that the living entity can go about its business. So we see here how Brahma is saying that even though I may be the creator, and even though I may create this phenomenal universe, please don't let me become proud. Please don't let me think that I'm the creator and that I've done this. Please let me understand that it's by your mercy that I have done this. And so we see, first off, he's praying for empowerment. Then he's praying for protection. Please, don't allow me to become puffed up. Don't allow me to think that I've become the creator of this universe. Because he's understanding that he can only create by the mercy of the Lord. He's understanding, I can't do this on my own. And then he's asking him for the Lord for protection so that he doesn't become proud. And there's a few interesting verses I You know, he understands that he's an assistant to Krishna. He's understanding that I'm actually doing this as a service to Krishna. It's not me doing it. And this is really important for us as devotees because sometimes we're given services that when we're effective in carrying out the service, we're able to do quite amazing things. Like devotees might go out and distribute books, and in a day they may distribute many books. I remember one time years ago there was a devotee distributing books. Gopinath Acharya, he left his body some years ago, and he distributed 900 hardbound Bhagavatams in one day, which is phenomenal. I mean, I couldn't, if I could distribute 2 or 3, I think that was fantastic. But he did 900 books. But, the tendency is when we do things like that, is because of the influence of material nature, because of the influence of the false ego, we think we're the doer. And Krishna, he says to Arjuna towards the end of the Gita, he said, but if you don't hear me and you act out of false ego, you will be lost. And this is the danger, is when we start to think we're the doer of the activity, this is the influence of the false ego. They're thinking, I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer. And Krishna says, if you act out of false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. Meaning, we will not be able to achieve the ultimate destination of life, as long as we're driven by false ego. So this is a very, very important lesson for us that Brahma is giving here, is don't act out of false ego. Understand that everything we're doing is by the mercy of the Lord. And if we take the time to analyze it, you look at our situation in the material body, right? Or in this material world. The sun rises up, causes the plants to grow. Yeah? The moon comes, it gives the sweetness, the taste of the vegetables. And then we cook this vegetables or whatever it is on the stove. That fire, that heat, that's coming from Krishna. Then we ingest the food. And the fire of digestion, Krishna says, I'm the fire of digestion. And that there's different types of fire within the body. And this fire of digestion, it helps it to digest. Also, there's another fire which helps to push it out. So when all these fires, the cup of Pittabhaya, when it's all in balance, which is all energies of the Lord, then we're able to function nicely in this material world. And if we analyze everything we have in this material world is coming about by the arrangement of Krishna. He in his one of his forms, one of his Purusha avatar forms, he expands all the universes out of his body. He enters into the universes. He brings the universe to life. From his navel comes Brahma, etc., etc. He enters into each living entity as a super soul, and through the agency of the super soul, the power of the super soul, the body is able to function. There's a really interesting story in the 8th canto of the churning of the ocean of milk, and we see in that story how the Devatas and the Daityas, they want to churn the ocean of milk to get this nectar of immortality. And so the Devatas, they went to the shore of the milk ocean and they prayed to Lord Vishnu for guidance on because they'd been defeated by the demons. They wanted to know how to become situated again in their realms, the heavenly realms. And so the Lord gave them direction to churn the ocean of milk using Mandara mountain as the churning rod and Vasuki as the churning rope. Vasuki is a giant snake with thousands of hoods. So the Lord gave them direction. But we see what happens in the story is how they started to carry Mandara mountain. They carried it a long distance. It was so heavy they couldn't carry it any longer. They dropped it. It fell on top of them and crushed and killed thousands of them. So the Lord came and he picked up the mountain. He glanced over all these demons and brought them back. All the demons, the demigods, he brought them back to life. He carried the ocean down. He popped it in on one hand, and picked up one hand, put it on the back of Guru, took the ocean, the mountain down to the ocean, put it in the ocean with one hand, and then the mountain, because it was very heavy, started to sink. So he manifested himself as Lord Korma, and he picked the ocean up, the mountain up, and he carried it. And then he also manifested another form where he steadied the mountain. And then Vasuki came, they wrapped Vasuki around, and he entered into Vasuki because Vasuki became tired from the journey, almost gave up his life. He entered Vasuki. But the Devatas and the Daityas, they also became tired, and he entered into them and he empowered them. So you see the whole activity was actually done by Krishna. And we need to understand this with all our activities. And this is what Brahma is praying for here, is that I don't forget that everything that's going on is simply by your mercy, simply by your potency, that it's all going on. This is also very, very instructive for us and very helpful for us as devotees to understand our actual position. Is that I'm just an atomic jiva, anu, in the region of the heart. My capacity is very, very limited, but by the mercy of Krishna, I'm able to achieve so much. And so it's very important to keep this firmly in mind. And then in the next verse, Brahma is playing, he's saying, the Lord's potency is innumerable. As he lies down in the water of devastation, I am born as the total universal energy from the navel lake. So he's saying, I've come from him. I'm accepting he's my source. I'm now engaged in manifesting his diverse energy. So he's acknowledging that I'm engaged by you in manifesting your diversity, not my energies, but your energies, in the form of the cosmic manifestation. I therefore pray that in the course of my material activities, I may not be deviated from the vibration of the Vedic hymns. So this is Brahma's sadhana. This is what he does, is he vibrates the Vedic hymns, glorifying the Supreme Person of Godhead. So he's praying that even though I may interact with so many things in this material world, please don't let me be deviated from service. Please don't let me give up the service you've given me. And this should also be our prayer, that we don't get distracted by what's happening in this material world. And you know, by this spiritual consciousness we see Lord Brahma is manifesting here. You know, he's praying to be constantly absorbed in praying to Krishna. By this spiritual consciousness, we can become completely freed from the contamination of the modes of material nature. So it's very, very important to remember. And just a few other points I had here on the next verse. And also it mentions here that, like this last prayer that Brahma is offering, is we must pray constantly for the Lord's protection and blessings to be able to carry out our duty. Because it's only by the Lord's protection and it's only by the Lord's blessings that we can actually be successful. And we see that Srila Prabhupada, he would always pray to Krishna, please protect me that I may not fall down. And he, you know, the devotees sometimes would ask Prabhupada questions about this, and he would say, I can never fall down. And this is not some proud statement. This is actually a statement of humility. Why can he never fall down? Is because he's always under the protection of Krishna, because he's always praying to Krishna for his protection. He's always absorbed in thought of Krishna. And as it says, what's that verse? Krishna Sriya Samamaya Hayandaka Yahan Krishna Tahandai Mayadikar. Wherever there is the light of Krishna, then Maya cannot exist. So as long as we're in the association of Krishna, as long as we're praying to Krishna for his protection, Maya cannot touch us. But if we forget Krishna, if we allow the influence of material nature to overwhelm us, then we forget Krishna. You know, one cannot exist in the presence of the other. If we're absorbed in external energy, Krishna is not there. If we're absorbed in Krishna, Maya is not there. It's a very, very simple thing, but very, very powerful. Yeah? And then Prabhupada says in the purport to the 24th verse, one who's a completely surrendered soul, always seeking protection from the Lord in the discharge of his entrusted duties, has no fear of falling into material contamination. So this is a really important point, because we're constantly being affected or afflicted by the influence of material nature. But if we're always absorbed in thought of Krishna, if we're always taking shelter of Krishna, then the material nature cannot touch us. So this is a very, very important point that Prabhupada is making there. And then in yesterday's verse is really interesting because, you know, for those who are pujaris and wake the deities, we chant this verse every morning and afternoon when we wake the deities. Very, very nice verse. What Brahma is praying for there is, he says, I wish that he may smilingly bestow his benediction upon me by opening his lotus eyes. He can uplift the entire cosmic creation and remove our dejection simply by speaking his directions. So here he's praying for benediction and he's praying for guidance. You know, please bless me by your glance, and please always guide me in devotional service so that I may never stray from the path. And we see there's examples in the Bhagavatam about how Lord Brahma has had difficulties. There's one time where he was enamored. He had a very beautiful daughter, and he was enamored by his daughter. And so here we see he's praying, don't allow this ever to happen to me. That I become bewildered by these things. And we'll see in the subsequent verses that Krishna says, don't worry, you'll never be affected by material nature. So Krishna gives, because he's the surrendered soul, then Krishna is giving his benediction that this will never happen. So really, I think these are these are really important verses for devotees to not necessarily to learn the verses, but to understand the mood of the verses. Firstly, to be seeking the Lord's to empower us in our service, and then to protect us so we never become influenced by false ego, we never become influenced by material nature, to protect me from deviation, that I don't lose my way in this material world. Because in our activities, there's so many instances where we have to connect or interact with the material nature, and at any given moment, if we're inattentive or we're a little bit careless, we can easily be influenced by the potency of the material nature, because material nature is very, very powerful. And we are very, very small. And it's only when we have that protection of Krishna that we can be safe from the influence of material nature. And then in the last verse here, he's praying to bestow your benediction and to guide me in service, so that I can be successful in service, so that I can please you with my service. Because ultimately, whatever we do in life, we want to please Krishna. This is our goal, is to always be pleasing Krishna. Okay, I'll finish there. Any questions at all? Yeah. There's this one here.
So we're just mentioning about the beautiful sky you saw recently.
Mention about what?
I'll get my phone.
Take this one. Oh, okay. Hopefully it works.
Thank you very much for the lovely class we did. You were in the beginning of the class. You were talking about the beautiful sky that you observed last night or the other day. And of course, we know Balaram's appearance day is tomorrow. And apparently, it's going to be the blue moon, which only appears once every 10 years. What's the blue moon?
Yeah, blue moon, it's not going to be blue. Blue moon means you get 2 full moons in a month. That's what it means.
Oh.
It's not blue. But the other feature about what's happening tomorrow is what they're going to be called a supermoon, because this is the moon at its closest orbit to the sun, to the planet. So it will appear to be about 7% bigger.
Yeah, so we can all observe that tomorrow. And you were saying about when you're near the electrical powerhouse, you can actually feel that vibration. And it reminded me of what it was like in Srila Prabhupada's presence. One devotee asked me recently, what was it like when you were, in Prabhupada's presence? What was it like? And that's one way of describing it. It was like you were in close proximity to this incredible spiritual powerhouse. And you could feel that vibration.
Potency, yeah. Actually, I remember years ago, we were doing travelling Sankirtan in Victoria, and I was driving from the Melbourne Temple up through Gippsland, and it was Balaram Punim also, and it was a super moon, and the moon was just like, wow, so powerful. You really felt, the mercy of Lord Balaram. It's quite interesting. Shanti Parayana Prabhu.
You were describing how Lord Brahma, he has nothing each time he's got to.
After the Mahapralaya, when the Padma-kalpa, when he's first born, after each day, the resources are there, and he's just basically recreating the lower systems.
I was just thinking of the situation with when the Purusha Shukta was described. There was nothing to do the judging with, so therefore, sent away or all the wisdom they took the Lord's body. Can you describe something about the Purusha Shukta?
Well, it's a prayer that they generally use or chant when they approach Svetadvip, when they go down to the ocean, the shore of the Milk Ocean, and because the Lord resides on Svetadvip. And when they go there, they chant this prayer, Purusha Shukta, generally. And the Purusha Shukta is just describing, Sahasrashira Purusha Sahasraksha, it describes the Lord's, he's the oldest, he's unlimitedly merciful. It's just the same as the prayer we chanted yesterday, same kind of ideas. He has 1,000 heads, 1,000 arms, 1,000 eyes, or it describes his form. So it's talking Purusha, it's talking, the different manifestation of the Purusha, and where he's situated, his activities, his potencies, all that sort of thing. There's 18 verses, I think. Lakshmi knows this prayer.
No, very different.
Huh?
I was just thinking the other day about the Brahma Samhita, and it's described that these are verses that Lord Brahma recited at the dawn of creation. And of course, in the Brahma Samhita, it mentions different devas. Lord Shiva's mentioned, Durga's mentioned, Ganesh is mentioned, among others. And I was just thinking, when was it? Obviously, it couldn't have been the Patna Kalpa because there's nothing there. So I always thought, or maybe I got this wrong, but I always thought once he had the inspiration for creation, in his ecstasy, he created those prayers. And he's describing all these different things. I was just wondering, what's your understanding of
See, it becomes a little bit complicated because the Bhagavatam describes different Brahmas. It's not just one Brahma that's being described in the Bhagavatam. Because we see here, I'm not sure if it's this chapter here, but there's one chapter, or one section of the Bhagavatam, where it's describing the creation. And then after Lord Brahma created, the Lord shook his hand. Right? In the 8th canto, when the creation's been going on for some time, and the Devas and the demigods, when Bali Maharaj becomes prominent, the Devas are attacked by the Daityas and they're kicked out of the planets, and the demons take over, and they create havoc in the universe because they're not interested in spiritual activities, they're interested in material fulfillment. And it describes there how Brahma goes down to the ocean, he takes all the Devatas with him, he goes to the shore of the Milk Ocean, and starts offering prayers to the Lord, who he has never seen. So it's obviously a different manifestation of Brahma from the one who shook his hand. So when the Brahma Samhita was chanted, not clear. But obviously it's some part of a creation where these personalities had already been manifested. So probably after, as you're saying, after he achieved realization, after he created the universe, because Brahma, Ganesh, the sun, none of these things are there. But he's praying, he's talking about them. He's talking about how the sun, goes on its course, all this sort of stuff. So obviously the manifestation is there. Which Brahma it is, I don't know. But it sounds like it's the Brahma who's now, the current Brahma, because he's reflecting on his relationship with Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. Goloka Namni Nijamnitaleta Tasha, he's reflecting on that, and he sees himself he sees himself as a cowherd girl at one point in those reflections. So obviously it's to do with this Brahma, with prayers by this Brahma, but it's only one chapter. Shanti Pranava.
Back to you mentioned about it goes from a similar structure to the structure here.
At least the previous verse, yeah.
Prayers with Krura. He also, there seems to be a structure you described his
Yeah.
Is that the standard thing, the structure of the prayers?
But it seems like that there's similar, like you look at, I was talking about Mangalachan, whenever an author writes a book, there's standardized prayers, or standardized, not prayers, but standardized approach. You offer obeisances, you seek benediction, that sort of thing. There's a standardized approach, and obviously this comes from Krishna. And also in the way we pray to the Lord, it's standardized. We see with the Gayatri mantras, they're standardized. It's sort of a standard approach that we offer to the Lord. So, I mean, you're going to see similarities in all of these things because they're approaching Krishna. They're approaching the same person, and it's always recommended that we don't manufacture our own prayer, but we recite the prayers that are given by the previous authorities, the acharyas. They're very, very important because the reason being is because it says Jnananas because they're seeing the truth, therefore they can reveal the truth to us. But we're not seeing the truth, so if we manufacture our own process to approach the truth, we'll never achieve that. But if we follow that which is given by the previous acharyas, because they are seeing the truth, it's just like, if like a friend rang me up yesterday, they're going to England, they've never been to England before. I mean, I've been there so many times. So he's asking me, well, where can I stay? Who can you put me in touch with? What sort of SIM card should I get for my phone? Etc. 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 So because I've done it all before, I can tell him the easiest way to do it. Of course, he can go there and figure it out himself, but it's going to take a lot more time and cost a lot more money. But by approaching someone who's got the experience, who's been through the whole thing, who's learned from others how to do it, then you can do it easily. So in the same way in the spiritual process, actually more so in the spiritual process, because you cannot figure out the spiritual process on your own. Not possible. Na te vidu svat. In other words, parato sato vamito vibhita grihavartanam. They can't by your own endeavor, by the help of others, or by a combination of both. You'll never figure it out. The spiritual process. We have to take shelter of an authority in the spiritual process. That's the only way, and that's what this Prabhupada is saying here in this purport, either by the super soul or from the Acharya. That's how we receive our guidance. And that's the only way to understand the spiritual process. So you'll see, in the spiritual process that these things are somewhat, there's variation for sure, but they're somewhat standardized. There is some variation in the way things are presented.
Just to add a small point to that, Nrsimha Kavacha, I agree with you, of course. But
Of course.
Very good. In the class I was preparing for a couple of weeks ago, I came across a letter where Prabhupada replied to one devotee and said, yes, you can offer your prayers in English, and yes, I like the prayers that you have written. You can address those to the Lord. So there is that room also for the individual prayers that the devotee may offer to the Lord.
There's always scope for individual expression, but nonetheless it needs to be approved by spiritual authority. Not that we just go on our own path. There's other times where devotees wrote prayers and Prabhupada was not happy with the things they said. That they weren't following the spiritual line, I guess.
The prayers of the cowboy girls or the queens when they're on the roofs of the Krishna consciousness, the idols, even though it's why is it it's not standardized?
But these are eternal associates of the Lord, so anything they say is spiritual. Anything they say is transcendental. But for us as sadhakas, there's a standardized process you follow. But when you're talking as eternal associates, there's something different. Okay, seems like everyone's eager to go and take prasad. So Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Go Premanandi.
Do you reckon it's the same for every Brahma in all the different universes when they come out of his lotus table? They all are completely clueless about what to do.
Completely clueless. Because they're in the dark, they don't know what's going on. But it's really nice, these prayers here, how he's praying for empowerment, praying for protection, praying, don't let me deviate. And I think it's so important for us as devotees to get these prayers.
I have one more question. Are there many Srila Darshana issues in each universe?
Yeah, because it's in your heart, in my heart.
Yeah, that's Paramatma.
That's Chiradakshaya Vishnu. Same God.
But he said to say, so where Mark comes from his navel.
No, it comes from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu.
Garbhodakshaya, sorry. So it's Garbhodakshaya. But so there, in each universe there's different Garbhodakshaya.
Yeah. Same person expanded in different forms.
Yeah.
There's one Karandakshay Vishnu, then he expands into each of the billions of universes as Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and then the Garbhodakshay Vishnu expands as Chiradakshay Vishnu in the heart of every living entity, but also there's the Chiradakshay Vishnu in Svetadvip.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, there's lots of them.